Hello, plant friends. Welcome back. I hope you guys all are staying happy and healthy and positive out there. So, this episode is going to be about this guy, or girl, or woman, man, this plant. And it's going to be super casual. Just, there's casual and then there's like super casual. So, this episode is going to be like super casual. Variegated Monstera, albo or alba. The variegations are the non-green parts, and the albo or alba refers to the white variegation. I would say that this is probably one of the most popular plants in the houseplant or the rare tropical houseplant hobby for the last, at least probably like the last year and a half, 2 years. And when you look at it, you can probably see why, right? You can see it's just absolutely stunning. The white really makes this just like a super classy plant. It basically fits into basically any decor. It looks good from anywhere, like all all angles. And after some experience with it, you'll find that it's relatively very easy to grow and to take care of, for most indoor environments. If we're talking about plants and caring for them, we really want to talk about the soil. This particular plant is in a substrate composition mostly of bark. I remember when I planted this guy or girl, woman, man plant, I just had another variegated monstera that had root rot. So I was just on root rot, I guess, precaution or fear, right? So I was like, all right, I have to just plant this one in a super well draining, super airy mixture, and so I did a lot of bark, and I probably did way too much bark. If I were doing it again, I really don't use that much bark nowadays. Nowadays, I use a lot of perlite. If you don't have perlite, I know that we have a lot of international viewers. If you don't have perlite, or perlite is expensive where you are, use bark. Use another, basically something that just doesn't hold onto water, doesn't compact that much. So perlite stays very airy, and the water just drains. I feel for this pot that has a lot of bark in it, basically the water drains and the bark stays moist, but it doesn't. Overall, the mixture is very airy. So, anyways, this plant has been very healthy in this composition. I have a few other albos in various other compositions, some that are much more perlite heavy, and some I have just even in plain sphagnum moss. So they all have been doing okay, right? So that doesn't reflect that I'm I'm good at planting, not at all. It just reflects that there are lots of ways to do things and lots of ways to plant, right? So we should all be, open-minded and at least consider alternatives to methods that are not our own, or methods that other that work for other people. And I think when we become more considerate and more open-minded of differences in planting, I think it allows us to be better planters. Let's talk about, I guess, the the moss pole or the moss plank. I have them on. Um, yeah, it's purely a support thing. I know that a lot of people ask about, is the moss on the moss pole or the moss plank, is that moss part really that essential? The answer is no. Absolutely not. This plank, if I were to do it again, I would just have a piece of wooden slab. I would not put the moss on. It basically just provides support, and the roots will attach to it your plank or your board or whatever, even if there's not moss on it. The moss does make it easier for the plant to attach, and it also makes it a lot easier if you were, for some reason in the future anticipated you want to, take the plant out or remove it. So this plant is really pretty firmly on attached to this moss board. But if I were to, if this plant like got even larger, what I would do is I would just add another board behind it, and then yeah, kind of like do it that way. I don't think I'll ever remove this plant from the board. I think it would just shock it too much, and I feel like there's really no reason. Uh, for the moss part, I don't mist it, I don't water it, I don't soak it. Yeah, I don't do anything extra for it. You do not need to water the moss or do anything to the moss. If you did, it wouldn't hurt. There's a lot of roots, that have just like attached to the board and into the moss. So what you would do if you were to water the moss and soak, the moss or whatever, the aerial roots or the roots that are in the moss would just, yeah, you would just be feeding your plant more water. I think the benefit to that, and also the benefit to all these aerial roots, besides the fact that I think they look cool, I think it may creep some people out, especially people who are not into plants, to see these like dangly, wiggly, things. It can be a little creepy. I think the benefit to having those roots either attached to the board or not is that if you wanted to feed your plant without having to like water or be worried about over watering, you can either soak the mist or mist the moss or soak the moss, or you can just mist the aerial roots, right? If you mist these aerial roots, the plant will absorb the water, and then basically the water will never be on the roots. No, excuse me. The water would never be on the roots enough to like rot the aerial roots. Okay, so we talked about the soil, we talked about the board, we talked about aerial roots. I think another thing we can talk about is like humidity. So for this one, and basically all my plants indoors, my humidity is, I'd say most part, usually like 55 to 65 is kind of the ballpark where I keep my humidity. So that's like, 55 would be, in the winter when I have my heater on and my humidifiers are running because my heater is like drying up the air, right? So it's like on the lower side during the winter. Then during the summer, I live near the beach, so it's like it's pretty comfortable, and the humidity tends to be in like 60 to I guess 65, even without me doing any humidifiers. I think if we're talking about humidity, the reason why people are talk about humidity in regards to variegated monstera and these plants is that you can see that there's some there's some drying or burning is the term of the variegated parts. So when you see it, you see that the burning is one, it's concentrated mostly on areas that are purely white, right? So that's one, and then two, usually the older leaves are the ones that have more burn. So the older leaves tend to have more burn, and usually the whiter parts tend to have more burn. I just accept it as just part of having these plants. I think that some plants, you're lucky and they're sort of burn resistant, and then other plants you're sort of unlucky and they're a little bit more sensitive to burning regardless of what you do. So I think for this plant, I think it's relatively pretty. I've been relatively pretty lucky. It hasn't burnt too much. If you feel that you have a lot of burn and your humidity is good, I think one thing I would recommend trying is to decrease the amount of light you're having on it, or decrease the amount of like heat, right? Like a lot of people have supplemental lights that are producing heat. So I think that, heat and a really bright, harsh light will make the plant burn more or brown more. So I think those are the things that I would do, right? Like if your humidity is 60%, I would not just try to drive it up to like 80%. Then you're just super uncomfortable, right? So I would like have a bare minimum of like 55 or 60% humidity, and then do the other thing, right? Maybe take it away from the light a little bit. Maybe take it away from any like drying direct heat source. So that's what I would do. This plant is does not get that much light. I would say that this plant gets medium light at best, medium indirect light. Um, yeah, and it's been doing okay. Sure, if I gave it, more indirect light, if I don't know, were a better plant parent and paid more attention to it, maybe it'll grow a little faster. I don't know, but it's been doing fine so far for me. What's that phrase, like better is the enemy of good or something, right? Like this plant is growing good enough, so I don't want to keep going like, oh, I'm just gonna make it better and better and better and risk root rot or doing something to damage it, right? So I that's the mentality I take with pretty much all my plants, right? If like the plants are growing, even if they're growing slowly, whatever slowly means, I think that people keep trying to do more and more and more, and it's like that's I don't know if that's good or bad, right? Like, so all right, so I think we talked about humidity. Variegation, I think we mentioned this, like the albo or the alba. This variegation pattern is the marbled type, right? It's a marbled. The other type of variegation is segmental. Basically, segmental means that like there's a chunk of just green and then there's chunks of just white. The marbling here basically means there's like white and green intermixed. So with this pattern, you're never gonna get like a half, not never, but essentially never going to get a half and half split leaf, right? I'm sure those of you who've seen like have looked at a lot of these pictures on Instagram or any other on the web, you notice there's some that's just like you have a leaf that's like pure green on one side and pure white on the other side. That is a segmental pattern. So this plant is never going to have that, right? So if you're looking for the possibility of having a half and half, you have to look more for a segmental plant. I actually have a segmental specimen nearby. All right, here we go. Not the best shape, right? So right, you can see why this is a segmental variegation pattern, right? The green is like pure green, and then the white parts are pure white. So this plant, assuming these cuttings survive and do well, has the potential to turn into half and half, or quarter and 3/4, or whatever, right? This is like what, quarter and 3/4 leaf. So right, segmental. The other one is marbled. And put this back. Okay. So we talked about that. Okay. I think those are the big things I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions about anything, I guess comment below. Like if you like this episode. And yeah. All right. Till next time, guys. Happy planting.